Hey everybody, Brian Stevens here, and I've got two people with me today I'm pretty excited about. One, Embedella, who you know has been on the podcast a few times. She works in our office and does our professional development and customer service training programs throughout the country. So thanks for putting out the certifications. And everyone knows that, you know, we got to have this sponsored and our own company sponsors it. So I can talk about whatever I want. And you all know that, I hope you know, if you don't know, we do student recruitment campaigns for districts and professional development around those soft skills like customer service and
ways de-escalation techniques.
And ways to keep students, but the teachers to keep your staff happy to do this customer service training. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I had the privilege of and this was, I saw this topic at the Council of Great City Schools in Orlando a few months back. And I was really interested because it was a ballot initiative. And more often than not, ballot initiatives, and you've done these before in your own school districts, where you're trying to get a tax increase or approval for a new building, or heavens to bed, you're trying to close a school. All those things that require community input and community approval or denial to do, normally they fail. They're really tough to pass. And I got to meet the chief of communications with the fourth largest district in the state of Florida, one of the largest districts in the country, 206,000, Scott Howat. Scott, how you doing, Chief?
Doing well, Brian. How are you?
Well, I'm tickled pink. We're finally getting together. I know you're such a busy man, so I appreciate the time, but I thought that you could really add a lot of value to people because the way that you systematically went through your process to get a ballot initiative approved by, well, I'm going to let you explain the story narrative, but I was just so excited. I was like, look, the interesting thing about Scott, for everyone to know, he is the chief of communications but he's been with the district for 31 years, give or take. So he worked his way right on up. And so he really is familiar with it. So I applaud his ability to stay there and really do that. But I want to get to the education, Scott. So tell us a little bit about what the ballot initiative is, and I'll interrupt you, sir, unlike your presentation, because I was just in the audience. Go ahead.
That'll be fine if you interrupt me. I get interrupted all the time, so it's not an issue. I'm happy to pause for questions or comments. So, yeah, we actually renewed a ballot initiative. It was a 1 mil property tax ballot initiative. We first put it on the ballot in 2010. It had been subsequently renewed twice, and this was the third time it was up. Of course, when you put a ballot initiative on the ballot for the first time, it's always the hardest time, right? Because it's about demonstrating the need and then being able to show the community what you're going to do, and for them to be able to envision that outcome without having anything other than what you're going to do in front of you. And I think from that point, you know, operationally is really what we were looking for, was operational dollars. We were coming off of the biggest decline in per student revenue that we had seen in 2008, 2009. The board was looking for an option. They went to the local option. And fortunately, we live in an amazing, very supportive community that supports education, sees the value of public education.
Well, now, Scott, and I think that this is the first great action item that people can get. So what you said is the first time you got to pass it, and you got to get them to believe you're going to do it, but then you have to prove that you did it. So right. What did you guys do after the first initiative to prove? And I want everyone to know, this was not like build a new school. These were operational dollars, which are so hard for people to vote for a tax increase to pay for. Just at least in my experience, we've helped with campaigns like this around the nation. And so that's really tough. But what did you guys do to actually prove that you use the dollars wisely in between the first and the second initiative?
Right. Well, the first thing we did was we showed, based on the need, what I talked about was, where would we be deficient? What would we lose because of the cuts in the budget over the last 2 years? What did we want to preserve? What did we want to protect as a community? And what did we want to really invest in moving forward and go out to the voters and ask them to do? So that was the first thing, was to try to come up with what is that list. So it really was about protecting our teachers, making sure that we had our teachers in place, that we weren't going to have to cut teaching positions, that we had highly qualified teachers, wanted to make sure that we were protecting student programs, that we were protecting athletics, and the arts. The art community came to us and said, hey, we don't want you to cut art programs because we know that that's important to this community, and it's important that we have an art program in every school. So that was the first part. But then when it came around to renewal time, it was about saying, this is what we did with the money. We took the $82 million that the 1 mil generated, and we invested it in those things. And we showed them with accountability the things that we invested in through the budget process.
So Scott, can you give me an example of how you communicated to the voters? Like specifically, like I love the fact that, so you just didn't say, hey, we just need general operating dollars. We need dollars to go to these specific things. And you said three things that caught my attention. Keeping teachers, which that means you're going to lose teachers if you don't do it. There's a nice little yin and yang to that. I like that. Athletics, which unfortunately in society, unfortunately, people want to fund athletics. And then the arts. And so can you give me a story or an example in one of those three buckets on how you showed you use the money wisely?
Sure. So for example, take athletics. For example, you were saying that athletics, unfortunately or fortunately in our society, it's important, but it wasn't just about, funding teams and coaches and JV teams and freshman teams. It was about funding athletic trainers to make sure our students had somebody on the field, making sure that they could take care of their safety as athletes. So it was making sure that we did that, for example. That would be one example of what we spent the money on, the portion for athletics. When it came to arts, we did not have an art teacher in every single school or an art program in every school. The commitment under the 1 mil initially was we'd make sure that we would have an art teacher and art program in every single school in Orange County. And we've been able to do that. We're one of the highest growth counties in the state of Florida. So we've been able to expand as we've expanded schools and added probably 30 plus schools since it first passed. We've been able to maintain an art program and an art teacher, at least one in every one of those schools. So those are the things that we could show through the budget and through testimonials of teachers who have been hired and been retained, and the programs and how they've expanded. And we have enhanced the arts and what we do in Orange County schools.
So, all too often people fail to go back and say, look, this is how we use the money. And it's funny, in government, rarely ever do people go back and look at the original budgets, right? And so how did you get that message? And like, I one of the reasons why I asked Imadella here is because when she's helping districts, communicate, she's always trying to determine what vehicles, was it social media? Was it email? Was it billboards? Was it TV? Was it radio? How did you said, it was good. You said, we're going to have a art teacher in every school, and we did it. But how did you get that to the voters?
So a couple of ways. So the strategy was obviously an educational strategy. I'm not a campaigner. I'm not an electioneer. I'm not out there, but I am educating the voters. And so, we systematically went through every grassroots organization, every group that we knew that is connected to the community in some way and feels invested in education in some manner. And so going through our chambers, our Rotaries, our Kiwanis clubs, from the smallest to the largest, those getting the information out to those that would be talking to others and take that message back to their individual. I talked to commissions. We have 13 municipalities. I spoke before at least 6 of them and talked about it. Those running for office, whether it was school board or they were running for state house, I talked to them. I wanted them to have the facts as far as what we were doing as a school district, how we were using the money, and where that need continued to be so that we could continue to do what we're doing from an educational standpoint. And I think based on our graduation rates that we've seen increase, our graduation rate before 2000, which was 10 years before the first mill, was under 50%. When I went back out this last time, our graduation rate was at 98.4% amongst our traditional schools. So that was very important to a lot of our techs, and that message did resonate across. We saw a lot of positive feedback from that.
It's funny you say you're not a campaigner, but you're doing so much of the foundational work that every campaign should do, and that they don't. So So you
I
reached
didn't
out-
say I didn't say I didn't understand it, Brian. I just
Yes.
said I'm not one, right? I understand
Yeah,
it.
you are
I'm
one.
just
You are.
not, that's not my role, right? I'm an
No,
educator.
no. But you are, as getting the communications out is so hard. There's a recent study that Harvard came out with. Well, I guess not, it's about a year old that a human being today with social media gets 15,000 messages a day. So how you cut through that noise is what I found so interesting. So did you have any budget or money outside of the grassroots organizing? Did any PACs or other groups come in, foundations, to help fund this initiative to do broader messaging?
So we have a great relationship with the Orlando Regional Realtors Association, and they did provide, outside of the school district, but in support of our efforts, provided signage and mailers that would go out to support the messaging. And that was handled on their end. I was made aware and had certainly spoken to the Realtors organization, but that was something they wanted to take on their own and through their PAC and support it. So mailers wasn't something that we had in the past. It was something that they wanted to do this year. They had done yard signs in the past, which is a way to, obviously during early voting and at the polling sites, and making sure that the signs they created and put out there really stood out, and they did. And it was a simple message on the sign, right, that they put out there. It was vote yes on the last item on the ballot, because school board initiatives in Florida are always the last item on the ballot. So that was the message that they put out there, and they did it in a very unique color that you wouldn't see during campaign time. It was in black and orange.
Oh,
that was the color of the sign.
Okay, so Emma, you make signs, you do these things. You ever use black and orange?
No,
I
don't.
Stood out like a sore thumb.
I bet it did. And we're always talking about like contrasting colors. And so the more contrasting the color, blue and yellow, there's a reason why, stop signs are red and white, very contrasting, yellow and black. Watch out, watch out, watch out. But you don't see that happen in campaigns. And I think when you're down there, you showed me a picture of it. And I thought it was kind of, it was next gen. So the realtors got motivated, and I can kind of understand that. If the schools are good, they could sell more homes. So it's personal to them. They took charge. Great idea reaching out to that bucket. Were there any? Okay, so you guys, you have a limited team with limited resources. You're getting out there and speaking, and I love the idea that you're talking to people that are going to talk to other people. The people running for office or Kiwanis clubs and things like that, right? So you got the realtors. Was there any kind of foundational support or education foundation support that jumped in?
No. We this was really just the school board sitting down. We put a communication plan together as to what we were going to do and a timeline of when we were going to do it, as far as the educational programming and pieces, and which groups we would reach out to and schedule in between what times, and timed it according to obviously when the election was taking place, when mail-in ballots went out, early voting, all of that. And it was really about getting that all taken care of it about 4 weeks before actual election day. Because I said the closer we get, we were seeing 60-70% of the ballots being turned in by the last day of early voting. And, it was really, it was over by the time we hit election day. So it wasn't for us an election day issue. It was really an education issue, and trying to educate those voters, and really taking a good 3 months to do it.
We should probably try to explain for those. Not every state has early voting. So what does the voting cycle look like in Orange County?
So in Orange County, they start with military ballots go out about 8 weeks prior, 8 to 10 weeks prior. Then regular ballots would go out. In our case, we were in the August primary, which was the 20th of August. The regular mail-in ballots went out after the 4th of July. So we were already having people, sending in their vote by the time we hit the middle of July. And then early voting started about August 8th and ran through the weekend before the Tuesday primary voting day.
So is it about
So
10 days of early voting?
about 10 days. Yeah.
And then is there a gap? Is there a gap between early voting and election day? Or does it merge right on
Just
top?
a weekend and a day. So it'll end on, it could end on Saturday or Sunday, and then you'd have Monday, and then election day is the next day.
I think that so often, Scott, people fail to understand the impact of early voting, and they either start too early or too late. And what we've learned, and this is, Emidel, how many people are voting early versus on election day, like generally speaking, across the nation right now?
I think it's close to it's more than half for sure are voting during early voting than election day, and that number has increased since COVID. More people are voting during early voting the last 2 years, they've noticed. So probably now it's probably closer to 65 to 70% during early voting, and then the rest on election day.
And certainly super voters have their favorites.
Yes. Super voters have their favorites. And I think it's funny. Sometimes we see with super voters, they actually want to vote on election day. They like
Yes,
the
that's
nostalgia of
true.
voting on election day. There are super voters that stick to early voting the first day of early voting. Usually a super voter either votes on election day or within the first 2 days of early voting, but they're very particular about which one.
And I guess, I'm sorry, a super voter is a person that votes a lot. All right. Some people vote, in microcosms, but Scott, did you guys get to pick the August primary? Or I imagine somebody chose that election for a reason.
So we did. We've been successful in the August primary previously. I didn't fear doing a November primary, although you get a lot more issues on those ballots that you have to deal with. You end up a lot farther down when you're the last item on the ballot on a general election because you have other issues that will push you down. But like I said, our electorate here in Orange County have been supportive. We felt that it would be, that it would be okay. There was what we considered a somewhat competing ballot initiative. The county had gone out for a 1 penny infrastructure tax for transportation, and they were doing it in November. So I definitely didn't want to be on that ballot in November. So primary was fine. If there was not a competing or possibly competing ballot initiative, I probably would have been okay in going in November and just push the campaign. Because when you get the summer disconnect, right, during the primary where folks go on vacation and they kind of they unplug, especially on the education side. And so, we had to make sure that we were educating our folks that were plugged in before they left for vacation, and then hitting them as soon as we felt like they got back before they started that cycle of voting.
When's the start of your school year?
We can't start any later than August 10th. So we started August 10th this year.
So luckily they'd been back to school for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Did you do any backpack stuffers or any PTA meetings or anything like this with the initiative?
No. So one of the things, the laws that had changed in Florida that didn't allow us to do to utilize any expenditures to push out messaging like flyers, those types of things, even if they were educationally based, we couldn't use our electronic system, emails, things like that to do it. So we really just relied a lot or heavily on word of mouth and, oral communication at that point, because a lot of the things that we were able to do, and that law actually went into effect on July 1. So everything that we did prior, we did prior to July 1, we did up till June 30.
So I've got lots of takeaways I'm sitting here writing down, but one of the reasons why I was asking you about the budget so much earlier is we see it's unfortunate. A lot of times the state legislators are handcuffing our school districts, and they're putting barriers on us to win things that would help benefit the children that other governmental entities don't have. And one of these is, and we're seeing this in more and more states right now, which is the school districts aren't allowed to educate on an initiative, which seems preposterous to me, but the charter schools can, the private schools can, the colleges can, and anyone that may be against our initiative can. And it's unfortunate that we're being handcuffed, so to speak, when our jobs are just trying to make sure that those babies get educated. So the fact that you guys managed to, or at least, kudos to the realtors for stepping in to do some of those things. And a lot of districts are using educational foundations, which are separate outside money that people donate to. But it's so hard because it takes money to educate, or it takes energy to educate. And that's one of the things that I was really impressed with. So can you just give us the results from this latest initiative? Because I want people to hear that so they understand.
Sure. So the initiative passed by 82.4%. And that was actually, I was a little disappointed. It was about 1.5 points lower than we passed it in 2018, but I was heartened that it was above 80%, because that's really that's what our goal was.
Well, Scott, that's within the margin of error, right? And I love your drive to win for the kids. I'm really enthusiastic. And what we've learned is we do tons of research, and it's like in our customer service training, there are going to be, it's somewhere between 7 and 12% of the population that is ornery and mean and doesn't want you to be successful. They were the person that will walk in and say no to every single thing on a ballot. It doesn't matter. So anytime there's something that gets close to 90%, it means it was so marshmallow, we saw there's nothing to it. We rarely see any initiative that gets over 65%. And here's Scott. That's why when Emma, when I was, hey, oh my gosh, I was like, this is really a district that over a long period of time has proven that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Would you, I mean, that's the one thing I took away, Scott, but what's the main thing you would attribute to getting that number outside of the communications and trying to sell your points?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a very supportive community that does support education in general. And I think they realize that the value of them providing that additional funding, and they're seeing it in the results in what's happening in the schools. And really, we felt like that, the vote is the vote. I mean, we could get 50% plus one and still get the millage, right, approved. But to us, this is really a referendum on what we're doing as a school district. Are we headed in the right direction? Are we doing the right things for our children? Are we providing the resources in the right places? And how does the public or the electorate feel about that? That was important, because I think that gives you even more assurances in going out and talking to the public about new initiatives or different things where they're showing that trust, because people just don't vote to hand over money unless they know that it's going to a place where they trust that it's going to be used for that purpose.
Well, Scott, I think you're not giving you and your team enough credit, because something you guys have done over decades has built that community that believes in the school system. So outside of the ballot initiative, outside of all that, how do you communicate with your parents? How often? What are some of the pro tips you would have for a young comms team that's out there starting to communicate with their parents? If they brand new school district, what would you say they need to do?
I would say there's first of all, there's no such thing as over communication. I think people are fearful of communicating too much. We did 44 town halls with our new superintendent. And she always, she had a question in her town hall where she asked the group about a communication question, like, how do you feel about how the district or your school communicates with you? And, we were using a platform that allowed them to put their thoughts out there and then rate their thoughts. And so when they were doing that, it came back over and over again that, yes, we get a lot of messaging from the district, but keep it coming was the other part, right? So we would rather know more and be able to delete or ignore than not have enough. And I think the first thing I would say is there's no such thing as over communication. I think the other thing is speed. The quicker you can get the information to your public, the more transparent you are would be the third one, the more they're going to trust you. And so from my standpoint, I tell my team, as soon as we know the facts, as quickly as we know the facts, we get the facts out, especially in a crisis situation. We can always put something out there and hold and then wait, but we want to make sure that we're getting it out there quickly so that parents know that we're on top of it, because they're going to hear it. That void, that space is going to get filled by someone else. And if you're not telling the narrative and telling the story, then someone's going to tell your story for you. And we try to avoid that at all costs.
Well, Scott, these are so fundamental, but it is so hard to get people to understand that over communicate. Speed is key. And another tip that we had a great lesson from the superintendent up in Douglas County about their communications during the COVID crisis. Over communication, speed. And one of the big takeaways there was also, and I've seen you do this with communications, by the way, Scott, is sometimes you have nothing to report on something that's tense, and you simply say, we don't have anything to report yet, but we're still watching. We're going to get back in touch with you. People have a tendency not to want to communicate when there's nothing to communicate, and that information is filled with a vacuum is filled with negativity. Right. So you got to watch those vacuums. And I think that is so critical. So is your team utilizing like text messages, emails?
All of the above. Yeah.
Okay.
So we do voice, email, text. We use social media, obviously, to also post. We're using all of that. We do, we're in the situation like everyone else where we need folks to opt in for text messaging, but once they do, they love it because then they know they don't necessarily have to answer their phone. We provide the message, the verbal message in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole, when it goes out district wide. So we make sure that we're communicating to all of our stakeholders, all of our families in at least 4 languages. So, and we make sure and we pace it. You don't want to stack your messaging on top of each other. We have a communications calendar, so we consult, so we know what district-wide messaging is going out when, and we'll bump stuff that is more evergreen that can go out at a later time that we can, when we need to do immediate messaging. So we're very conscious of that because you can over communicate, but then you can inundate. And so there's a difference between those two. So,
right. So wait, what was the 4th language you said?
Haitian Creole.
So
Creole.
I'm from Lakeland, Florida, which is right down the street.
Right.
My family's there, but I've gone to school there in, I don't know, 125 years. The world's changing. It sounds like you guys are keeping up too with what your audience are, your customers, so to speak, the parents, right? So that's really pro. So I'm going to summarize a couple key takeaways. And if you two have any extra key takeaways, I'd like to hear them too. 1, I think, Scott, one of the reasons why this ballot initiative was so successful is you spent years building trust. So you didn't wait for the need to come and then make an ask. You were building trust by over communicating, having good speed, being transparent, having a good pace to it, looking at what they need when they need it, and being proactive. And so then when it came time to make a big ask, you had already built a strong relationship and a strong foundation. And I thought that was key to all this. And then certainly when it was time, partner organizations came in, awesome sauce. And you guys went out there and got the grassroots community to speak about it. And it doesn't sound that complicated, but I know it was a ton of work. Emma, do you have any key takeaways that I saw you jotting down notes feverishly?
I think that one of the key takeaways I saw, and it kind of bounces off of what you were saying, Brian, but the grassroots organization and the chambers, that's key, because even if you did have a budget and even if you were sending out mailers and text message and emails, even if you were able to do that, it's a lot different when it comes from someone that's involved in the community that is at that grassroots level. People, like you said, word of mouth is really important. People will believe a trusted resource or someone that they know and what they're saying before they will believe what's on a mailer or what they get in an email. So I think even if you did have all these other resources available, that the grassroots organization and the chambers still would have been a huge component, because you have to have that community voice to almost serve as a validator almost.
Scott, I think you said quite a bit, but I want to give you the final remarks on any other key takeaways that I may have missed in my feverish note taking.
No, I think you hit a lot of them, but it does come down to, I tell my team, our number one purpose, our why, our one thing is relationships, right? It's about building good relationships, and you do that through trust and transparency. And I think you have to do that, whether it's the business community, your parents, all the way down to the student level, them knowing that, what you say you're going to do, and you're going to follow through with that. And I oversee public relations, media relations, and legislative relations. And I said good or great is implied between those two words. It's never bad or poor relations. It's public great relations, right? It's media great relations or good relations. It's never poor. And so you have to make sure that you're building your relationships with the media, with the public, with your legislators, your elected officials. We have a great delegation here in Orange County that works, really closely with us and is supportive. And so we appreciate them as well. So.
I'm smiling so much right now, Scott, because you said something. I was just training a school district yesterday on great customer service. There's my little plug again for our company, right? So a great customer service, and it's that continual issue of over communicating, bearing with information. I don't know. You just said so many great things that I was just talking about yesterday, and I'm gonna have to get you to teach some of these courses going forward. So hey, Scott, thank you so much for being on with us today. He's a chief communications officer with Orange County Public Schools down in my hometown area, Lakeland, Florida, which is right across the way. And if you do need customer service, you want your people certified in customer service so they can be great communicators also, well, give us a call. So thanks for watching.